One, what a sweet opening act. What a heartfelt speech from Ashley Biden. And then the main event at the Democratic National Convention, Joe Biden plays a set list of the greatest hits in hoaxes. Fact-checking Joe Biden. 2, the House Oversight Committee has investigated and determined that Joe Biden and his family fraudulently profited from service in the United States government to the tune of over $20 million. Will it lead to impeachment with Trey Gowdy? 3, Cowboys, Packers, Jaguars, Patriots. No matter how you feel going into every football season, it always seems that your team zigs to your zag. So how do we feel about our teams going into the NFL season here on The Will Cain Show? It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Always on demand at Apple or Spotify. Just hit subscribe or watch the Will Cain Show every Monday through Thursday live at 12 o'clock Eastern Time on YouTube by simply hitting subscribe. Come hang out with us here on the Willisha. We got a big show coming up today. Trey Gowdy is going to join us and break down the latest from the GOP House Oversight Committee, which puts an investigation to the accusation for years that the Biden family is, in fact, the Biden crime family. What will it all mean? Will it lead to impeachment? That's coming up a little bit later here on the Will Cain Show. But let us get to night number 1 at the Democratic National Convention with story number 1. Joe Biden took to the stage on the first night in Chicago at the DNC. He was a headliner held out of primetime. He took the stage at something like 11 p.m. Eastern time, well after much of America had gone to bed. But shockingly, still awake, Joe Biden. And he came out with energy. His eyes, they were alive. He performed. He didn't mutter. He didn't slur. He had energy. Now, it was anger, but he was ready for his night, perhaps the last night for Joe Biden as the head of the Democratic Party. While he still remains the leader of the free world, while he still remains the president of the United States, Joe Biden had his moment in the spotlight, and he chose to take center stage by playing his greatest hits of hoaxes. That was his set list. Let's run through some of the top of the charts lies uttered by Joe Biden. First, he told you about Donald Trump calling the fallen, America's veterans, America's soldiers, suckers and losers. Joe Biden.
That Trump, when in Europe, would not go to the grave sites in in France. The brave service members who gave their lives to this country, he called them suckers and losers. Who in the hell does he think he is? Who does he think he is?
So joyful. What a positive and optimistic message. What full of mirth and wonderment. So much joy. Joe Biden tapped into his energy. His eyes were alive, but they were alive with anger. I guess it was better for Joe Biden than the alternative, which was a sequel to his performance in the debate against Donald Trump. No, instead, that was left to some other members who took the stage at the DNC, like, for example, Congressman Jamie Raskin. Jamie Raskin took to the stage and once again gave us a moment, as Democrats have done on repeated occasions, straight from the HBO sitcom Veep, when he seems to have all of a sudden been confronted by a blank teleprompter. Jamie Raskin.
Someone should have told Donald Trump that the president's job under Article 2 of the Constitution Someone should have told Donald Trump.
I feel bad for Raskin. I actually really do. You know, I mean, that is, if you asked any television personality, what's one of the greatest fears that you could encounter, it would be a blank teleprompter. Now, the jokes write themselves, and you would say, oh my God, these people are incapable of speaking without a teleprompter. For what it's worth, there is no prompter here in front of me on the Will Cain Show. But I come into this show knowing I'm just going to have a conversation with you. I'm just going to talk. I don't have a script. When you host a primetime show, for example, though, it's a very script-driven show. Now, that's all primetime shows. There's virtually nobody that riffs their way through an hour of primetime television. Not Sean Hannity, not Tucker Carlson, not Will Cain when he sits in for Jesse Waters. That doesn't mean that you're a robot reading the words of someone else. Almost all of those people that I just mentioned write their own scripts. It is their own thoughts and their own opinion. But a great fear, I think, of anyone who then goes toward reading what they have to say instead of conversing or thinking in a less polished manner like we do here on the Will Cain Show, is that all of a sudden you lose the script. You lose the teleprompter. What people do so often is print it out. You have printed pages on your desk. And it's a little bit of a juggling act if you were looking into a teleprompter that is a camera lens eye and all of a sudden it goes blank, for you to reposition your eyes, find where you were on that page, start marking where you are, and catch up on your speech. This literally happened in Veep, as I mentioned, a show starring Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who plays the vice president, who does ascend, spoiler alert, to the presidency. It's a really funny show, but she's giving the State of the Union address, and they're editing furiously her script, and they blank it out. They delete it, and she's standing there in front of a joint session of Congress with a blank teleprompter. I mean, it will send your brain into complete panic, and you can almost see the panic in Raskin's eyes, as something must have happened with his teleprompter. He had no idea where he was, no idea what to say next. For me, it's never happened to me. It's happened where all of a sudden it starts jumping around and you're like, oh my God, what's happening? Did somebody just have a stroke running the prompter? It goes flying up, it goes flying down, and you realize they're trying to find their places. You have to just divorce yourself from it. It's not a life buoy. You can't hang on. It's not even a life jacket. It's more like a compass pointing you which direction to swim. And I think at that moment, you just have to let go and say, okay, now I'm going to start thinking my way through this instead of reading my way through this. And hopefully at some point, because you can't ad-lib a 15-minute speech very well. I mean, Donald Trump has a teleprompter. He ad-libs on and off of it, but he does have a teleprompter, for example, in those hour-and-a-half rally speeches. But they become compasses for him. He goes in and out of the prompter. Always, you got to be ready to go out of the prompter. But that's a learned skill, and I feel bad for Raskin right there. He is terrified in that moment. Oh, my God, what do I do? Presumably, he's confronted there with a blank teleprompter. But Joe Biden made it through, but he didn't stop playing again his set list of greatest hits of lies. And so after giving you the suckers and liars hoax, he went on to some of your other fan favorites, like that if he loses the election, Donald Trump will call for a bloodbath. Joe Biden.
He's promising a bloodbath if he loses, in his words.
He's promising a bloodbath if he loses. Now, I could fact check this, and you know, I shouldn't take for granted that people all know exactly what I'm talking about, but these are all they're all been fact checked, but they've not all been fact checked by institutions that are flying under the banner of presumed objectivity. For example, CNN.com did a fact check last night wherein they went through Joe Biden's speech, but they had nothing to say about these greatest hits of hoaxes that I'm taking you to right now. If you just go through CNN's fact check, for example, you'll see them talk about things like Biden talking about taxing billionaires or Joe Biden on carbon emissions. They keep going down Biden's claim about removing lead pipes from schools and homes. It's almost enough to bore you absolutely to death on what they have, but nothing about bloodbath, nothing about suckers and losers, and absolutely nothing about, for example, whether or not Donald Trump wants to be a dictator on day one. Here's Joe Biden.
And that he'll be a dictator on day one, in his own words. By the way, this sucker means it.
Now, Donald Trump, joking around, said, well, if I was dictator, I just want to be one for one day. And then Joe Biden and Democrats latch onto that and say, see, he's a threat to democracy. He's a would-be tyrant. Donald Trump says there will be an economic bloodbath if he loses his election, meaning that the economy will tank under a then Biden or now Harris administration. He's not calling for blood in the streets, but they lean into that because that's the narrative of this election. January 6th, the end of democracy. He's going to be Hitler. They lean into that. And so he has to use these lies over and over in his greatest hit set list. By the way, think about set list, guys in New York. I was thinking about this because, of course, I just went back to the Zach Bryan concert this last weekend. And what I did going into the concert is I looked up the set list of what he'll play, and I listened to that to do my homework, right? So, I mean, of course, I'm ready for Oklahoma Smoke Show, or I'm ready for Heading South, but I'm not. I want to know them all. I don't want to be surprised. I don't go to a concert for discovery. So, I wanted to listen to like discover or do my homework on the set list of things like 9 Ball or the 5th of May. Little deeper cuts. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, you're reading off your sheet. I know, it's fine.
But here's why. So there is an element to life that's fun, that's like exploratory. Like I went to Farm Aid one time. My wife and I went to Farm Aid in Connecticut. It was awesome. You guys know Farm Aid, Willie Nelson.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like 20 acts. I mean, Neil Young, John Mellencamp, Chris Stapleton, Sturgill Simpson, on and on and on. It's amazing, right? But no homework, just sat there for the day, and like Nathaniel Rateliff comes up. I'd never heard of him. And all of a sudden I'm like, my wife and I, who is this? And we loved him. And then so that's fun. But generally, I think that things are better when you have context, when you understand where it's going. So what I mean by that is like, you guys know my son is going to Ireland this weekend to play in the week 0 college football. He's not a college football player. He's a high school kicker and punter. And his high school team is going to be playing as one of the, Friday games before Florida State and Georgia Tech kick off in Dublin. And I was talking to a buddy this morning. He's like, what do you think that trip will be like for him? I'm like, nothing. Like, well, they will not get any experience of Dublin. They will, it's an organized trip, so they'll take them on tours. But when you have no context for anything and you're traveling with a bunch of American buddies and you're there to play American football, you're like, where's the McDonald's in Dublin? That's what they'll do. You know what I mean? And so you need context to make it richer. Like, where am I? Where is this place? Like, Dan, you just wanted a soccer team. You and I were texting about it, and you picked Aston Villa. And one thing you said to me is, I've been reading about their history. Well, that's going to make it way more fun because you have context about who they are, right? And that's part of the fun, learning the history and the past of Aston Villa.
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, I always have to do that before I go through anything. And your son, it's not like they could have Guinness pints, and know about Ireland. So they're not old enough yet, but yeah.
Right. Right. I remember when I traveled to Europe in law school, I went to Italy and I went to Venice, and I was by myself. And I read a book called, if I've told you guys this, sometimes my conversations blend on air and off air. I don't know. Same person, but bad memory. I think the author's name is Irving Stone. I read a book called The Agony and the Ecstasy. Did I tell you guys this?
I don't think so.
About the life of Michelangelo? About the life of Michelangelo.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, yeah. On the phone call.
Oh,
no, it was during the show.
Well, like by doing that and learning like who was Michelangelo as a human being, who was he as a person, and how he picked a piece of marble. Traveling, I did Florence as well. Traveling to Italy and seeing all this stuff had way deeper meaning to me. Like I had it in context. Like the David didn't just become a beautiful statue. Now I understood like how many years he worked on it, how he selected that piece of marble, all this stuff. And it's just such a richer, deeper understanding. And so but the reason I'm bringing that up is I'm thinking about these set lists, right? And it made Zach Bryan better for me to listen to all of that ahead of the concert instead of going into it blind. And the context you need on Joe Biden's set list to understand exactly what's going on here, right? Bloodbath, dictator for a day. This is to make you believe that you are on the edge of saving democracy. And if you don't, Donald Trump will come in and he will be literally Hitler. And of course, Joe Biden ran that one out there. He ran out that Donald Trump praised Nazis and white supremacists as very fine people. Here's another greatest hit from Joe Biden.
The president was asked what he thought had happened. Donald Trump said, and I quote, "There are very fine people on both sides. My God." That's what he said. That is what he said and what he meant.
But here's your context. He didn't say that. Here's the set list you have to know going into this concert. That when Joe Biden plays that greatest hit, it's been thoroughly debunked. That Donald Trump literally says, as we've covered on this show on numerous occasions, I'm not talking about the white supremacists and the neo-Nazis. They should be condemned. Literal words from Joe Biden. But all of these, economic bloodbath versus the insinuation of blood in the streets, if you haven't studied the set list, if you haven't given the context, if CNN is not interested in fact-checking any of this, then it washes over you, and the David becomes just a pretty statue. The speech becomes just part of Joe Biden's legacy. And it's interesting to me, Joe Biden's legacy. When he came out after that introduction by Ashley Biden, I'm going to be real with you. I was like, oh, he's kind of energetic. Oh, that's a sweet moment between he and his daughter. Oh, he is going to lean. He can lean into the lie, but it would be a lie that he could pull off. That he's a transitional president to a younger generation of Democrats. That he's the selfless guy stepping aside for the future of the party and by extension the country. But that's not what he did. He reverted to his greatest hits of hoaxes. He divided once again. And in my mind, leaned away from that legacy that's being handed to him. They're trying to prop it up. They're going to create it. But leaned back into a divisive, incompetent, failed presidency in one last set list by Joe Biden. The House Oversight Committee has investigated the Biden crime family, and they've published their investigation. We're going to break it all down coming up with the host of the Trey Gowdy podcast and Sunday Night in America with Trey Gowdy. Trey Gowdy, here on The Will Cain Show. I want to tell you about Tunnels to Towers, who, the foundation, honors fallen heroes by supporting their families, and they always have, in a multitude of ways. Let me tell you one of the ways they do that. They do it with families like that of U.S. Army Chief Warrant Officer Shane Michael Barnes. So Officer Barnes, he enlisted in the Marine Corps in 2011, earning numerous awards, including the Distinguished Flying Cross. He cherished the camaraderie of military service and excelled as a supportive leader. During a 2023 deployment, Barnes perished in a training flight when his aircraft crashed into the Mediterranean Sea. He leaves behind his wife, Brandy, and their 2 children. Now, to honor Officer Barnes' memory and service, the Tunnel to Towers Foundation provided Brandy and her children with a mortgage-free home through their Gold Star Family Home Program. This program provides mortgage-free homes to the families of fallen service members, honoring their sacrifice with a lasting tribute. And I can tell you that I have personally seen Frank Siller and Tunnel to Towers award these mortgage-free homes to Gold Star families over and over again, like they have here for Army Chief Warrant Officer's family, Shane Michael Barnes. You can join Tunnel to Towers on its mission to provide mortgage-free homes to America's heroes and the families that leave behind by donating $11 a month to T2T.org. That's T, the number 2, T.org. Trey Gowdy coming up on The Will Cain Show.
The world of business moves fast. Stay on top of it with the Fox Business Rundown every Monday and Friday. Fox Business reporters, anchors, and hosts will bring you beneath the stock market speculation and boardroom drama to tell you about the biggest business stories of today. Whether you're on Main Street or Wall Street, Fox Business is invested in you.
Listen to the Fox Business Rundown every Monday and Friday at foxbusinesspodcasts.com or wherever you download your favorite podcasts.
The Democratic National Convention, live on Fox News.
Do we believe in the promise of America?
Get Democracy 24 coverage you won't see anywhere else from the #1 name in news. Plus, special analysis from the voices America trusts. There's a reason why more Democrats, more independents, and more Republicans watch Fox News than any other news network. The Democratic National Convention, all-week coverage on Fox News Channel. America is watching.
It's time to take the quiz.
5 questions, 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week.
History, pop culture, science, sports, civics. How much do you know? Let's find out.
Who was the first person to walk on the moon?
Jackson or something?
Neil Armstrong.
Take the quiz every weekday at thequiz.fox and then listen to the quiz podcast to find out how you did.
Play, share, and of course, listen to the quiz right now at thequiz.fox.
House Republicans declare Biden engaged in impeachable conduct just hours before his 2024 DNC speech. It's the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Always on demand, just hit subscribe at Apple, Spotify, or on YouTube. While you're there, while you're subscribing to the podcast, you can head over and subscribe to the Trey Gowdy podcast. Trey, also the host of Sunday Night in America with Trey Gowdy and the author of Start, Stay, or Leave, joins us now here on the Will Cain Show. Hey, Trey.
Hey, Will, how are you?
I'm good. Looking good. Slick back hair today. You've been going with this hairstyle for a while, so I'm proud of you on that. It's good. It's a little of the Gordon Gekko look. I'm just waiting for the change up.
You know what? I told my wife, I guess 2 days ago, it's not if, but when Fox figures out that I'm not really much for television and gets rid of me, I will never cut my hair again. I will look like Gandalf in Lord of the Rings or the guy from the Count of Monte Cristo. It will be long gray hair with 2 earrings as soon as they get rid of me.
Earrings? You'd be an earrings guy, Gowdy?
Double hoop. Like George Michael from Wham.
Trey and I have some mutual acquaintances, friends even, from Baylor. And based upon this conversation alone, I'm going to go back to those acquaintances and be like, you got to give me a little more color on who Gowdy was in college. Because I want to know high school Trey Gowdy. If you're just itching to get back to the hooped earrings and long hair, I'm going Trey Gowdy was in South Carolina. You're one of 2 guys. You were either a Trans Am guy, right? You were the muscle car long hair guy, or you were kind of like the alternative. I'm not going to go hippie because you're not that old. So like the alternative guy from the 80s. But I don't think that's you. So I'm kind of thinking Trans Am guy.
No, it was actually neither, because my father, as soon as my hair touched my ear, he took me to the barber, and I had to take my earring out to go home for spring break, or I would not be alive. I would not be here with you if my father had seen me with an earring in my ear. He had 3 daughters. He said he didn't want 4, so he would have. I would not be with you right now.
He had 3 daughters. He didn't want 4. Well, we all went through our long hair phase. I did that. Now, I mean, I got close to the shoulder, beyond the ear. Let's put it that way in college. All right, Trey Gowdy here live. It looks like he's live from the DNC, which is awesome. So you watched last night, I'm sure, Trey, with Joe Biden's speech. And I just got done talking about this. I think that it's interesting that Joe Biden sits at a moment in his career, which is interesting because it's been a 50-year career or more, where he kind of has an opportunity to find his legacy. Because the Democrats and the mainstream media are going to tee it up for him. They're going to allow him to paint himself, or they'll paint the picture for him, as a transitional figure, a selfless figure who stepped aside for the betterment of the country. But I thought last night he did not lean in to that opportunity. He did not lean in to that figure, which would have required, I think, a softness, some welcoming in, even of like Republicans and moderates. But he did I think, Trey, he did the divisive thing. He did the greatest hits of hoaxes like Very Fine People and Bloodbath, and he was angry. And I thought he almost rejected his opportunity for people to accept him, even if it's a lie, even if it's not true, but accept him as this selfless George Washington of 2024.
Yeah, well, he would have a hard time selling us on the selflessness because you literally can still see the fingernail marks from them dragging him out of the Oval Office. It's not like, I mean, the only reason he's not running it, Will, is because not only would he have lost, he would have cost them the House and the Senate in overwhelming numbers. So, I mean, you can say he jumped right before he was pushed, but they were pushing him out. I actually, when I think of him, think a little bit differently. I think of a man who lost a wife, lost 2 children. You could argue lost a third to addiction. So the humanity part of the story is part of it. As a husband and a father, my heart breaks for anyone who's buried a child. And then I think about Robert Gates, who reminded us that the fact that you're experienced doesn't mean you're right. He says he's the most experienced foreign policy hand that we've ever had, but yet none of his decisions were correct. He also was the pilot of a country that most people think is headed in the wrong direction. I mean, make no mistake, the reason he's not the nominee is because he was losing. It wasn't an act of selflessness. He's not a Christ-like, Billy Budd-like figure from Melville's Billy Budd. He was going to lose.
No doubt. No doubt. And by the way, when Ashley Biden gave her speech and he came out, I guess that's what I'm neglected to say, but what I was feeling in my opening monologue today is it humanized Joe Biden in a really endearing way. I think it did. I saw some of the same thing of what you saw there. And then he quickly veered away from it by being angry and doing the same old trite speech that he's done. And I don't think truth and objectivity allow him to paint himself as this George Washington transitional figure. I totally agree with you. I love the analogy of the fingernails. But I think that they're going to help him create that image. That's what they'll do. I mean, there was Nancy Pelosi last night with a We Love Joe sign, smiling and saying, "We love Joe." And she's the one with the bloody knife. And so they're going to help him. They're going to help him create that image if he'll create it himself. And I don't know, Trey. I don't know. That's a lot of muscle. CBS, NBC, ABC, CNN, New York Times, Washington. That's a lot of muscle for image creation. Muscled forward to create that picture of Joe Biden.
His legacy first of all, it depends on who gets to write history. Typically, it is not folks that think like you and I that write the history. His history will be that he defeated Donald Trump. Democrats never loved Joe Biden. He's a gaffe machine. I mean, this is the same guy that said Barack Obama was clean and articulate. I mean, if there are 2 bigger racial tropes than those, I don't know what they would be. Afghanistan was a disaster. There's a reason that he was losing. But you're right. They want to send him off, and I get that. I mean, even if someone's a bad employee, you still have a going away party for him. I think he fell for the trick that a lot of politicians fall for. They forget who the jury is. I mean, you're a lawyer. You know who the jury is. You think the jury are people in the room. Hey, look, they're already voting Democrat. If you're a delegate, you're already voting Democrat. The jury would be people watching from home. That's who you're trying to persuade. But I think he fell prey to, I need the applause of the audience that I'm in front of. That's not who you need to win the election. You need people who haven't decided yet who they're going to vote for. It's an old trick to fall for. You would think somebody as old as him wouldn't fall for it, but he did.
That's really good, Trey. Really good about the jury. I also really like what you said, like people like me and you don't get to write history. We certainly don't get to write the first draft of history, right? Now, I think we have cracks at it on the second and third draft of history. And just made me think when you were talking, in your estimation, Trey, what is the biggest falsehood that we understand about history that, Like you said, people like you and me don't get to write. So somebody with a different idea, a different sense of reality, a different subjective view of the world wrote that you're like, I'm just curious if you have one. Off the top of your mind, that is totally wrong. The way that history is understood is totally wrong.
God, that's a great question. I think my mind immediately goes back, and this will surprise people because I am a Republican, although I've been accused of being a rhino. I'm a Republican. It goes back to the Civil War and the post-Civil War days. The damage that was done to our country, that is still being done to our country. I remember being at Liberty University with Tim Scott, and they brought us to speak about the Constitution, which is a majestic document put together by geniuses. But I was sitting there on the plane trying to look at the Constitution through the eyes of an African-American man who couldn't vote, who wasn't considered fully whole. And so I think we would all do well to look at history through the eyes of those who did not feel empowered by what was happening. So the biggest myth in history, I don't know. There's a reason that, my father, was never crazy about the history books that we were given. The victors write history. I guess the best example of that is the battle at Thermopylae in, 374 BC. 300 Spartans preserved democracy for us. When I go back in history, that's not a story that's told very often, but they held off the Persian army for several days until the Athenians could figure out, hey, we could win this war if we help. You and I might not be having this conversation, certainly not in English, if not for 300 Spartan soldiers. You raise a great point. Wow. I mean, can we participate in the writing of history? Yes. But people with your and my orthodoxy don't usually go into education. We don't write school books. We don't set the curriculum. I mean, have you ever thought about running for school board? I hadn't. I'd rather be in a North Korean prison than be on school board. So
it's a little dramatic.
It's a lot dramatic. I don't want to be in a North Korean prison, but I don't want to be on a school board either.
Trey, on the, I joked earlier about like the Trans Am thing and on that. In a lot of ways, I kind of feel like I do know who you are. I don't know. I think that you and I have some similarities. We're not to a T. So I'm thinking about what you said about trying to see the founding documents, majestic and written by geniuses, no doubt about historical geniuses. Like we're talking about over, in my estimation, centuries of periods. You take a 300-year period of history and you're looking at some of the best and brightest right there in that moment in history. But what you said about trying to see it through the eyes and the lens of an African American, and I think it's the hardest thing in the world. And it's a big ask. It's a big ask to ask an African American. It's a big ask to ask any human being to divorce principles from the flawed individuals who executed those principles. It's really big ask, but it is the ask of African Americans. It is what America has to ask of them, because the principles themselves are beyond good. They go back to what I said a minute ago. They are moments of genius in human history, unparalleled over centuries of time. And they were flawed in their execution and application. And so what we're asking of African Americans is not to reject that document, but to reject the flawed application of that document for a century, right? And it's a tough ask because, of course, it didn't apply to me, right? Those principles didn't mean anything to me. Yes, but they can. And yes, but they should. And not only that, they are ultimately the only deliverance from the thing that was a grotesque moment in history. I get what you're saying, and it's a hard ask, but it's like a necessary. It's not just a necessary ask, it's a necessary step to understand the genius of those principles, divorced from the flaws of the men that created those principles.
So you and I are both trial lawyers, and this is the way we would do it. We would say, go back to what Jefferson wrote. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. It's just a shame that Jefferson wasn't there for the writing of the Constitution. He was overseas. But our birth document, our birth certificate, does have that level of aspiration. And even the Constitution itself, it begins with, in order to form a more perfect union. So we admit our imperfections, but at least we set that as a goal. And we gave ourselves a process to amend, to correct our mistakes. So I don't – look, I've never heard Tim Scott complain one moment about it. I was more lauding the virtue of trying to look at life through the eyes of people who do not agree with us, because you and I at one time had to spend our living persuading people. And people who agree with us don't need to be persuaded. So how do you persuade people that say, I'm not quite with you? And empathy is a good way to do that.
So I want to ask you about this as well, Trey. The House Oversight Committee, just hours before Joe Biden takes the stage last night, puts out their investigation. They accused Joe Biden and his family. I believe, I don't have it right here in front of me. I think it was like over $20 million worth was the accusation from the investigation. Yeah. $27 million, right. Improperly profiting various members of the Biden family through deals made in Ukraine and Kazakhstan and a host of other countries as well. What comes of this, Trey? You've been a part of this process. I mean, I see the word impeachment being thrown around. What comes of something like this investigation from the House Oversight Committee?
Nothing, unless they can tie it to this general theme that she was the co-pilot of the Titanic. Because after this week, he's really irrelevant. He's still the commander-in-chief. I don't think he should be impeached because I don't want her to be the president. I think if you're running against an incumbent Kamala Harris, it is much more difficult than running against Vice President Kamala Harris. Does it arm you with ammunition if she does become the president, if you maintain the House? Yes. Does it show that oversight works? Yes. But, you know, you're a really smart guy. You and I can't figure out whether a tree that falls in the forest makes a noise or not. I think it does. But if nobody picks up on what the Oversight Committee has done, does it matter? And if it's not going to be on Fox or the Wall Street Journal, who's going to hear about this? And they're going to say, well, that was old news, or, you know, that wasn't Kamala Harris. They'll draw a distinction. What I find unique is they were partners when it benefits her, but she was independent and separate when it doesn't. And if Republicans want to win, first of all, they need to stop talking about things nobody cares about, like race, gender, LSAT scores, and IQ. They need to talk about policy. And she really was the co-pilot for the Titanic. I mean, there's a reason most Americans think we're headed in the wrong direction. So to the extent they can tie what Comer and Jordan have come up with to her almost aiding and abetting it or being complicit in it, then it could work. But you got to break through this honeymoon she's in.
And that sounds like a stretch to be able to tie her to it, because I haven't, you know, I've stayed up on this story as best as possible through this, and I've never seen her name linked to any of this. Now, I didn't read the House GOP's report, and if her name comes in, does her name come in at any way connected at all to what the Biden family is accused of doing?
Not that any of my friends have mentioned, and I'll show a little bit of duplicity here on behalf of the other team. This is a little-known fact, Will. It may shock you. Donald Trump's name is mentioned more in the Minority Report on Benghazi than Hillary Clinton's name is mentioned in the GOP report. And I see the look on your face. You're sitting there thinking, what did Donald Trump have to do with Benghazi, Libya? And the answer is nothing.
Right.
But the minority, led by the late Elijah Cummings, God rest his soul, mentioned Donald Trump's name more than the Republican report mentioned Hillary Clinton's. So they get away with stuff that we don't get away with. You're a sports nut. I'm a sports nut. The referee is not the same for both of us.
In what way did he mention Donald Trump in the Benghazi report?
It was a political document. I mean, he had nothing to do with it. He didn't make the decision to go to Libya. Right. He wasn't responsible for getting the folks out. It was no way connected. But do you think anyone from the New York Times ever asked Adam Schiff or any of the other members of the Benghazi committee, hey, why did y'all mention Donald Trump's name? Because he actually was a businessman when this happened. Do you think that question was ever asked?
Right.
No.
So, okay, Trey, really quickly, I want to get to two more things with you if I can. I don't know your time frame here, but so, okay, your jury is the American people. Your jury is the persuadable American people, most importantly, those who are still trying to consider between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. I agree with you that some of the arguments that you just talked about, is she Indian, is she black, I do not think that is a persuasive argument to the persuadable jury pool of Americans. But what is, Trey? Because here's one example I would be curious what your thoughts on. I talked about this yesterday. Accusations of communism are a knife that has been dulled by Republicans through overuse in time. However, that doesn't mean the knife should stop cutting. When Kamala Harris says, I want equal outcomes, she is giving voice to Marxism. When she talks about price controls, she is giving policy to socialism. And those are big policy issues, but I do worry or wonder, has that knife been dulled over time that it doesn't actually affect the persuadable jury pool?
So I would tell you, if you and I were co-prosecuting this case, let's go find a new knife. To the best of my knowledge, she was given 2 jobs as vice president: stay awake during funerals and protect the border. I don't know whether she stayed awake during funerals or not. There's no video. I just know that there are lots of innocent Americans that were killed while she was put in charge of the border. There's a reason most Americans think the country is headed in the wrong direction under her stewardship. So border, economy, crime. When I hear Mayor Pete Buttigieg talk about crime being down, well, of course it's down because victims quit calling the cops and cops quit showing up. So, yeah, crime stats are down. But crime is not down. So anything that's related to policy, Republicans win. When it gets into personality, mispronouncing her name, ethnicity, all of that other stuff, we lose. So the question is, and look, President Trump has won. Being the nominee, you win certain rights. You have the right to pick your vice president. You have the right to set the agenda. But you're also a fiduciary. I mean, you're a fiduciary for people who are worried about the future of this country. So you have an obligation to change your strategy to effectuate a win. I mean, you're a sports nut. I'm a sports nut. If you're calling the same running play every single down and you're not ever making a first down, you have a fiduciary responsibility as the coach to go throw a pass every now and again. I just think the policy you win. How can she defend the border? She defends the border with the Senate border bill, Will. Name me a single person who would still be alive if that Senate border bill had passed. Just one. Name me one person killed. I'd go through the names of every person who lost their lives to somebody. Every one of them. Know them by name.
I love how you approach this as a lawyer approaching a jury. But let's go back to sports. All right. Where are you in the game, Trey? Like, how do you feel? What's the score? Kamala Harris, Donald Trump. Are we in the third quarter, late third quarter? And who's winning? And who has the momentum?
I think we're coming out of halftime. And, you know, I tell all my friends, this is going to be a long week. It's like being in a courtroom and the prosecution is arrested and the defense begins to present its case. You don't get to talk. I mean, it's a long week, but it's just a week. So how do you use this week? You listen, you plot, you plan. I mean, whenever I hear her say on day one, she's giving us an opening, Will, because she's actually on day 1,201. I mean, don't tell me what you're going to do on day one. You haven't done it yet. So listen, and then the third quarter starts as soon as this convention is over. And if it's on policy and we remain disciplined in our messaging, you will win the House, the Senate, and the White House. If you continue to litigate this on an ad hominem basis, you will lose the race. Thank God for that bulldog in West Virginia, in Tim Fahey in Montana. You're probably going to hang on to the Senate, but barely. But if it's on personality, we lose. If it's on policy, we win.
All right, last question. I've thought about this, Trey. I'm sure you've thought about it a lot. But to me, Kamala Harris, this is I'm not saying Donald Trump is Alabama. I don't know what Donald Trump is in college football. Let's put it this way, though. He is a top 20 program, okay? And Kamala Harris she's worse than Baylor, to take a shot at you gratuitously. She is a, 70 to 100 ranked program in the nation. This is not a game you should lose. You should not lose this game. If, in fact, this election is lost to Kamala Harris, Trey, there has to be a long look in the mirror on all kinds of levels. Like you said, media, politicians, narrative, everything. What happens in your mind, like, if Donald Trump loses?
All right, I'm going to agree with you on one point, and then I'll answer your question. I do not think she can win. I think Republicans can lose, and there's a difference. I think Republicans can lose. When you have this many people saying we're headed in the wrong direction as a country, you should not lose to the person who's the co-pilot of the vehicle. So
and Trey, on top of that, she's an objectively bad candidate.
She's to the left of Bernie Sanders. She literally, I mean, that's not hyperbole, literally the most progressive liberal member of the U.S. Senate. So what do we do afterwards? There's a reckoning, Will. I mean, is there an heir apparent to the MAGA movement? I think Donald Trump is a unicorn. I don't think anyone else can mimic him. There are others who try, but I don't think anyone can. I'm a limited government kind of guy. I am more of a traditional conservative, less of a populist. So there'll be an internecine fight over the future of the party, and there'll probably be some dark days as we figure it out. What I have noticed about Democrats is they're willing to push aside this person that they lauded last night. They're willing to push him out because he was losing. Do we want to win enough to figure out how to resolve our differences and present a unified front? Or are we just happy being Instagram stars and winning in our own individual House districts while the country goes to Hades in a handbasket? We got to figure that out. Are we Kardashians, or do we really want to govern?
It's really good. It's been too long. I know you're hesitant to do media because I don't know if you're on the golf course or what, or you're just big time. I don't know why it's so hard to get you, but it's worth the wait to get Trey Gowdy here on the Will Cain Show. All right, Trey, have fun.
It should be hard because I love you. We're fellow Cowboy fans. I mean, I love you.
I got to watch Special Report to see you, or Sunday nights. Those are my options. Sunday nights or Brett Baer. But I love having you on the show here, man. So we'll be checking out the Trey Gowdy podcast as well. Have fun at the DNC, Trey.
Thanks, Will. I always love talking to you. Hook 'em horns, or whoever you pull for.
That's it. I'll give you sick 'em bears just in response to that kind of nice behavior. Yes, hook 'em horns and sick 'em bears. All right, there goes Trey Gowdy. Hopefully we'll get him on the show a few more times before he hangs it up, puts in the gold hoops, and grows his hair out. That would be nice to get him a few more times before he just says sayonara to this conversation. All right, coming up in just moments. Speaking of sports, Cowboys, Packers, Patriots, Jags, how do you feel? And how would you feel with your team on the line and a 50-yard field goal to win the game? How would you feel if that's your son? Coming up on the Will Cain Show.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network.
I'm Janice Dean, Fox News senior meteorologist, and my podcast, The Janice Dean Podcast. Every week, I'll be focusing in on a place or a thing that deserves your attention because it makes the world a better place. Be sure to subscribe to The Janice Dean Podcast at foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And don't forget to spread the sunshine.
America's listening to Fox News.
The Democratic National Convention, live on Fox News.
Do we believe in the promise of America?
Get Democracy 24 coverage you won't see anywhere else. From the #1 name in news. Plus, special analysis from the voices America trusts. There's a reason why more Democrats, more independents, and more Republicans watch Fox News than any other news network. The Democratic National Convention. All-week coverage on Fox News Channel. America is watching.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network. Listen to the all-new Brett Baer podcast featuring Common Ground, talking to lawmakers weekly from opposite sides of the political spectrum about the issues of the day and how Americans can find common ground in a politicized world.
That's just not happening on Capitol Hill. It takes leadership, right?
Yeah, it absolutely does.
Along with all your Brett Baer favorites like the campaign, the candidates, the all-star panel, and much more. Available now at foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
The no-win proposition of having your son be a high school kicker and punter. Plus, how do you feel about your team? We're getting ready to kick off NFL and college football here on the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, Fox News YouTube channel. and the Fox News Facebook page. Hit subscribe, Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Joris Luce says, hi, European here. We love the USA and are grateful for what you did for world peace the last 100 years or more. That's a nice way to start it up, Joris. That's a really nice comment. Thank you for that. A little bit of gratefulness goes a long way. But personally, I'm very worried if DT gets the most votes. Why, Joris? I'd be curious. Why? Is it because the whole NATO stuff in the U.S. isn't going to bankroll the back of the security for the European continent without some contribution from Europeans? I'm actually not trying to create a straw horse or pick a fight. I am curious if the threat is, if what you're worried about is America first. Besame says, talking about Joe Biden, he appears juiced when he yells, when he does the yell. Yeah, I do think that could be part of it. I mean, there's a reason for Joe Biden's ups and downs, right? Fatigue is clearly one of them. With age, you have your good moments and your bad moments. But like everybody wondered, I mean, two-a-days and tinfoil, like everybody wondered, he's not taking the stage until 11. That's not good. Like he's been talked about the sundowners effect, that he's bad after 8 p.m. And actually that was a report that came out that he really kind of worked between like 10 a.m. and 6 p.m., right? 7 p.m.
Yeah, it's past my bedtime, so.
Hey, I just finished Killing Kennedy by Bill O'Reilly. You know what I was taken aback by? All right, so we all see Barack Obama go gray in 8 years, and George W. Bush as well, right? And everybody talks about how stressful the presidency is and the aging, and I'm sure that it is. You know what I'm a little bit surprised by that I learned in Killing Kennedy is the work schedule. It's not quite as strenuous as you would believe. Like, I believe Kennedy woke up at like 7:30. He gets his CIA daily intel brief. He read the newspapers. He took breakfast in bed. And then he got dressed and got going and worked. Took meetings starting about 9 a.m., right? So by 9 a.m., he's in meetings through about 12:30 where he takes lunch. And then after lunch, Kennedy goes and swims every day because he had a lot more health problems than I was aware of as well. Like his back was super bad. He had all these issues, Addison's disease. So he swam every day, naked, by the way, and had meetings with dudes naked in the pool with him.
Bold.
Just how they rolled, like the Greeks. And after he swam, he took a nap. So I'm guessing at this point, after a swim and a nap, you're looking at like 2 or 3 in the afternoon would be my guess. And then he did work until 7 or 8 at night when he had his dinner at 8. And then he did little extracurriculars all the time at night. That was made very clear. All the time.
I mean, I'm
going to say it one more time so you fully understand. All the time.
You could take some liberties when you're the president, I think.
But my takeaway was, I mean, that's a lot. That's a decent work schedule, but that is not. I mean, there's guys putting in way, way longer schedules. And Churchill famously also didn't get going until Churchill was a night owl. So I think he worked into the, small hours of the night. And he took breakfast in bed. He had scotch for breakfast, by the way, in bed. He was out. He drank all day.
Damn.
All day long.
But
he had like 2 brandies.
I'd be curious. But Biden's schedule is not that strenuous. It's not. It's just not. I would be fascinated by a side-by-side breakdown on presidential schedules just to see how much they have to put in on a day-to-day basis. I'd be really curious.
But do they actually give out the real schedule, or is it just kind of like what they want us to think the schedule is? Because we'll never see what he's really doing and how long he's actually doing it, right?
That's a good point.
Well, I don't know, because I think it's not just hours. Like, I think sometimes hours worked is a bad proxy for stress and the strenuousness of a job, right? Like, there's a theory out there that you have decision fatigue. That a human being in any given day is only capable of executing at a high level a certain amount of choices and decisions. And I think it was George W. Bush said, that's my job. I'm the decider, right? Like, all day you're presented with, here's the issue, here are your options, you choose what we have to do. And so you're doing that all day. Like, famously, you guys know this, Steve Jobs wore the white T-shirt and blue jeans because he didn't want to expend any willpower on that one choice to start the day. He wanted to save it up. Like, it's a finite resource.
Interesting.
How much discipline, choice, and willpower you have throughout the day, so I'm not burning any up on what I have to wear. That was Jobs' theory. So, I mean, whether or not you work 6 hours or 8 hours, that is what you're doing all day, and I'm sure it takes an incredible amount of stress on your body, and they're high-level, stressful decisions. Yeah, I'm sure that's, hours worked is not always. Now, you can outsource those decisions, and my suspicion is a guy like Biden has outsourced a lot of that stuff. Which, by the way, brings me to Mary Hooper on YouTube, who says, Trey, who is running the White House? Such a great question right now. I know, but it's serious. Like, who is running the White House?
Sounds like a joke, but it's not.
It's not.
Don Pegar on YouTube says, if the Democrats would cut out the lies of their speeches, you could be in bed by 8 p.m. All right, so it's college football week 0 this weekend. Georgia Tech, Florida State. You pumped up, tinfoil? That's your squad, the Seminoles.
I know. I'm feeling it. It feels pretty good to be back. A little nervous just because there are a lot of question marks, especially at quarterback and receiver, but I feel pretty confident. So,
well, you got Georgia Tech, Florida State on Saturday, but in the lead up, it's like spread the college football gospel weekend, right? So they have high school football games, and I've mentioned one of the high school football teams going to play in Ireland is my son's high school football team. It's his first year on varsity. He's a kicker and the punter. Now, last week, he went 2 for 2. He kicked a 36-yarder and a 33-yarder in a scrimmage. It was a preseason, doesn't count on your record game. He kicked a 50-yarder in warm-ups, by the way.
Dang.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I'm super proud. That's the truth. But I got to be careful. Because the upside on the kicker, Dad, is this is like it's like going to the roulette wheel and saying, put it on 18. Whatever my number is. I feel like if it hits 18, I get it super jacked, but the overwhelming odds are this season there's some heartbreaking missed field goals. It's high school. It's high school.
No, I have a question for you as a father, too, because I'm not a father yet. How do you deal with that stress? Like in any sport with your kids? Like, that must be the most stressful thing, watching your kid play a sport and want them to do well. I would be just beside myself stressed out.
Well, I'm going to let you know this season about this because up until now it's been like JV and it's very low stakes, Not that varsity is higher stakes in the grand scheme of things, right? But It's still high school football. But here's a theory I have for you. A fluid game like basketball or soccer is easier.
True.
It's fluid. It's constantly moving. A mistake can't linger. And the guys who don't let a mistake linger are rewarded. But a job-based sport like baseball or football are a little bit harder because it's clear you failed or you succeeded, and you may not get a second chance. Whatever. So I don't know. I'm super interested and concerned about what this is going to feel like this season.
Talk about getting more grays.
But I talked to you guys about this. Like, kicker is one of those things, I think punter as well, where you don't index for level. Because all we ever watch those guys are like pros, like, oh, yeah, look, 40-yarder. But if a high school kid goes out there and quote-unquote, shanks a punt 25, 30 yards, like, well, what's a high school punter supposed to do? He can kick a 40-yarder. He also, the point of the difference is the consistency. I just don't think we expect the offensive lineman to look like NFL offensive line, but we expect the high school kicker to look like Brandon Aubrey, who just kicked a 66-yarder with the Cowboys.
It is a bit unfair, and you see these kids online now with TikToks just kicking the ball out of the stadium. It's weird. Like, how do people get better at things? I watched all these, like, skateboarders. They look so much better than guys 25 years ago. It's like it's improving. Like, 60 yards is going to be nothing in, like, 8 years.
Well, you know what's fascinating about that? During the Olympics, I saw Michael Phelps has no more – I think he has no more records.
Yeah.
I don't know that he holds any more world records or one more. He holds one maybe. So swimming is one of those sports where every cycle people are getting faster and better and makes you wonder where it can go. But here's what's fascinating. Track is not. Like the guys that won the 100-meter dash this year, Like, Usain Bolt would have blown them away. Mm-hmm. And he's held that record for as long as Michael Phelps. And I saw an Instagram video, like if you'd given the guys running in the 30s and 40s the same track, literally the track that we're running on now, and the same spikes and the same shoes and the same starting blocks and all that, they'd be very close to what Noah Lyles ran in the 100-meter dash. It's not, they didn't. Their time is slower by I think it's like a second or less than a second. But the argument is that's a lot of technological stuff that they didn't have then that's helping the guys now. I just think it's kind of interesting how a lot of sports, they just keep going, and some you kind of stall out a little bit, like track. I do wonder, will we have kickers regularly kicking from over the 50-yard line at some point? Brandon Aubrey just hit a 66-yarder. Justin Tucker just hit a 68-yarder. Like, this changes the game if guys start hitting kicks from that kind of distance, tinfoil. You were going to say something?
Yes. But I forgot.
Go for it.
This is going to be good.
This is going to be real good.
God, you are so ready for prime time. You are so ready.
Get him a prompter.
Wow.
Saw him raise his hand.
I finally get to talk. I finally get to talk, and now I butcher it. Jeez.
That's right.
That's a second. That's the second strike. That was the second strike. The other day, I told you, if you get a chance, just say what you got to say. You don't have to answer my question directly. You have something to say it.
Write it down.
One more strike, you're out.
I got distracted by by an email notification coming through, and my ADHD just triggered. It's the worst.
Do you have ADHD?
Not officially.
Okay.
Just self-diagnosed.
All right. I want to do this really quickly. We're missing young establishment James today. He is a Patriots fan. Mm-hmm. Tinfoil is a Jaguars fan, and Two-A-Days is a Packers fan. Of course, I'm a Cowboys fan. Everybody keeps coming up to me. How do you feel? How do you feel, Will? No CeeDee Lamb. Dak Prescott needs a contract. Should they sign Dak? That's the biggest questions I get. How do you feel about this season, and should they sign Dak? And I've thought about this, and the answer is absolutely you sign Dak Prescott. I don't care if he's not a top fiver, he's a top tenner, and maybe this is the antithesis of everything I preach, like go for home runs, but I am afraid of the quarterback wilderness in pursuit of finding the next Patrick Mahomes. I am afraid of the bad odds of saying, you know what, you can't win the Super Bowl without a top 3 quarterback, and trying for that and ending up with Daniel Jones for all these years. And nothing against Daniel Jones, but that's where the Giants are stuck. They're stuck in that zone. And there's worse. There's worse places to be than where the Giants are. And the vast majority of teams are in that. And with Dak Prescott, I have a top 10 quarterback. That I feel very, very confident in. Maybe he's 8, 9, maybe he's 10. But he's in that range. And the answer is, yes, you absolutely sign Dak Prescott, without a doubt.
So the reason you guys haven't won is not Dak's fault?
It's in part Dak's fault. Mm-hmm. It's not all Dak's fault.
Okay.
What? Would you guys
I don't
are
know.
Not Cowboys fans. You would say we walk away from Dak Prescott?
I would consider it, man. I mean, you got a lot of shots, a lot of chances. I know it's scary out there. I know it's uncertain, but I don't know. I would have a hard time going in another season with him.
Okay, hold on. So the Cowboys have been incredibly lucky. They have gone from when did it start? To go from Tony Romo to Dak Prescott, an undrafted quarterback to a 4th-round quarterback and end up with franchise quarterbacks is totally against the odds, right? That is incredibly lucky. We had a little bit of wilderness period between Aikman and Romo, okay? The only franchise you could argue who has been luckier is your team, Dan, the Packers. You have gone almost directly from Favre to Rodgers to Love.
Yes, sir.
And you seem to have hit 3 times. So what I think happens is you are now living you're in a take it for granted mindset. Like, that's just how it works.
Yeah.
You know? But it isn't how it works. And both of us have been lucky, and I'm aware of it. Patrick's a Jags fan. I mean, you had Mark Brunell and Trevor Lawrence. And you've had a lot of other things in between. Yeah. And if you're ever in that zone, it's the worst. It's the worst. So you're walking away from Dak Prescott is sitting on 17 with the dealer showing, I don't know, 13, right? I got a decent chance to win. There's a chance the dealer gets an 8, or 7 or 6. But I think I have to stay. I can't hit the 17. I got to stay.
But after this, if you guys don't make it to the Super Bowl or as far as you want to go, is it done? Are you done with him?
No.
In your mind? Really?
I don't think so.
How much longer do you give him?
You just keep drafting backup quarterbacks until one beats him out.
Yeah, true.
That's what you guys did in Green Bay.
Yeah,
and you shoved Favre out, and then you shoved Rodgers out, and you never had your... If Trey Lance can beat out Dak Prescott, great, but I don't think he can. All right, but my point bringing this up is I don't think I'm very good at predicting my seasons for my teams. I don't know when we're on the verge of a good season. I really don't. I didn't see the Mavericks coming this year. I didn't see the Rangers coming last year. I don't see it coming. And it often is the opposite of how I feel. So I don't feel good about the Cowboys. I think they'll make the playoffs, but I think it'll be the same thing as always. So the question is, does that mean it's actually going to be a great season? Because I'm not good at this. So I'm betting against myself and my instincts. So what I thought is, tell me how you guys feel about your teams going into this season.
You are way too lucky, by the way. Just luck everywhere. Ridiculous.
What do you feel, Patrick?
So, Patrick, how do you feel? How do you feel about the Jags going into this season?
Not good. The offensive line looks terrible. I don't know if they got enough on defense. I mean, the South is always weak. I don't think the Texans are that good.
All right, so you're pessimistic.
They make the playoffs. Yeah, they make the playoffs. I'm always pessimistic.
That's kind of no surprise. That's right. I was going to say 2 days. That's no surprise.
No.
He's pessimistic.
Yes.
And the only thing I've ever seen him optimistic about, two things. I'll give him this, is Florida State and the Will Cain Show. I think he's optimistic about this project.
Where it counts.
Yeah.
I try.
Everything else is just going to hell in a handbasket in Patrick's estimation.
True. That's absolutely true.
And after the end of last year,
most notably the country.
FSU one. Yeah, the FSU one is not looking good either.
Yeah,
it's only the Will Cain Show.
All right, 2 days.
I feel good about it. So I was worried about Jordan Love. I thought he would take a few years to really get where he is now, and it's been fantastic. So I feel really good about it. I'm knocking on wood for that exact reason. But got Josh Jacobs in there. Hopefully we got a year out of him. That's pretty good.
How confident are you in Jordan Love? Like, do you think Jordan Love is, like, for sure now a top 2-tier quarterback in the NFL?
Absolutely. Top 10 quarterback for sure.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
I don't feel that way from afar.
I think he'll be a top 10 quarterback midway through the season. I have that much confidence. I didn't think I would.
I know how you're going to answer this. For this season and this season alone, I want you to do this, and then we're going to wind this show up. You've got our 3 quarterbacks, Trevor Lawrence, Jordan Love, Dak Prescott. For one season, draft them. Who's last?
Trevor.
I know my answer.
Come on.
Dak second, Jordan Love first.
Who was third?
Trevor.
Yes, Trevor.
Mm-hmm.
Tinfoil, you'd take your own guy last out of those 3, right?
I don't think so. I don't think Dak Prescott's very good, to be honest.
Oh.
I don't think Jordan Love's that good. I don't know. I mean,
we'll see.
I have to see more, get more out of
I'm
Love.
clipping this whole segment, so we'll see in about a few weeks.
See, I try not to.
It goes like this in reverse.
Everybody's hot takes on Twitter to use them later when it happens, but I don't like to give opinions beforehand for this reason, because of my opinions.
It goes in reverse order.
Yeah.
Third, Trevor Lawrence. Second, Jordan Love. First, Dak Prescott. I'm willing to place a bet right now that whatever metric we want, besides wins and losses, because that's a team stat, that Dak Prescott has a better season than Jordan Love.
I don't think so. I think you're wrong. I'll place
touchdowns, interceptions. We'll find the metric.
Okay.
We're going to find the metric and figure it out. All right. That's a bet. And that's a show. An extended version here of the Will Cain Show. All right. Same time, same place. See you again next time.